Clear left, clear right.
I still get goosebumps when I hear these words.
Movement right.
2007 is considered a golden year for gaming industry, with titles like BioShock, Crisis and Halo 3 launching. And among all this greatness, Infinity Ward managed to create something magical.
Magic.
It's almost impossible to replicate the effect Modern Warfare had on people when it first arrived. Market was full of World War shooters. A few modern shooters that did exist were no match to COD's cinematic storytelling and sheer shock value that it brought to the table.
Oh shit, he's about to take out that bridge! Stop the bloody truck!
Now before we proceed further, it is presumed that we are all veterans here. So for the guys who had been living under a rock or just don't want any spoilers, then this video is not for you. So now that formalities are out of the way, let's discuss Modern Warfare and why was it such a unique title to release from Activision's stable, and how it showed the true brilliance of the original Infinity Ward team, which sadly parted ways after Modern Warfare 2. But that video is for some other day. Let's focus on what made COD's modern iteration such a huge deal and why it's almost impossible to recreate its magic.
Bird, package secured, returning to base.
For the first time in COD's history, the game featured a linear but a gripping story akin to a Hollywood blockbuster movie. The game's opening mission is no slouch either and helps set the tone for the rest of the game fittingly. But it's the second mission of the game that manages to bring the point home.
Continue tracking.
Where we get to play as captured head of a state of some Middle Eastern country. As the opening credits roll, the player gets driven around the streets of an unknown city, and during this ride, we get to witness the violent and savage results of the recent military coup. Now it was not something new, and COD games tend to do that to build up a narrative, and we as gamers expect this pressure to be released via jam-packed action sequence, resulting in players' inevitable rescue. So the car finally stops and we arrive at a stadium-cum-terrace base where one of the game's main villain is broadcasting live feed of the events. Player is dragged from the car by these two fine gentlemen, while Al-Assad's militaristic speech reaches a loud climax. Player is led to a wooden pole and handcuffed to it as Assad pulls out a pistol. This is where the gamer in us gets active, knowing that a rescue op might be coming, so we brace ourselves for the inevitable action to follow. Villain makes one final statement to the camera, turns to the player, cocks his gun, aims it and fires. And that's it, mission is over.
Price. Al-Assad just executed President Al-Falani on national television.
When you first play the game, this mission will catch you off guard, and yes, after so many years later, it still manages to have a very deep and powerful impact on the psyche of the player. In hindsight, you realize that this mission was just there to introduce the main villains and help further the narrative component of the game, letting you, the gamer, witness the last moments of a man held as captive, up close and personal. If the presidential execution scene was pretty good, the nuclear explosion segment is nothing short of brilliant. Around the halfway point in game, the player takes control of Sergeant Paul Jackson. As Jackson, we spend numerous missions killing the bad guys and saving the day. In one of the missions, Jackson and his men are about to leave the combat area when they witness an RPG hit one of their squad mates' Cobra helicopter. So in one frantic scene that looks like a scene from a Hollywood movie, we save the chopper's pilot and fly away to safety. Once airborne, a message gets played from command.
All U.S. forces be advised. We have a confirmed nuclear threat in the city.
That Al-Assad has planted a nuclear bomb somewhere in the city and Jackson and his team must get out of there as soon as they can. Just then, before the message could be finished, nuke explodes with half a dozen US helicopters still within the blast radius. Jackson's helicopter also gets caught up in the blast wave. Player is forced to watch helplessly as the helicopter pilot he just took so much trouble to save flies violently out of the back of the helicopter, falling to her death. Further, Jackson's helicopter also crashes into the ground. Jackson's view goes dark, and the next loading screen reveals that not only has Jackson somehow managed to survive the crash, but we will indeed be controlling him for the next mission. At this point, nothing seems awkward, and it feels like we are in for another scripted sequence that franchise has implemented many a times during its run, all of which have ended the same way. Your vehicle crashes, you get out, enemies stream to your location and you fight your way out, rinse and repeat.
NBC-1 nuclear, Bravo, NB062634.
The mission starts with Jackson's vision fading in and out, and his fluctuating heartbeat is the only thing that can be heard apart from the howling winds. The player moves forward on his belly, eventually drops awkwardly out of the chopper onto the ground. This is the moment where we expect to be able to stand up, and so we do manage to stand up on our feet. And you tell yourself, nothing new for Call of Duty, I'm used to it. So now we expect to start moving at our normal pace anytime soon, and at which point we will get our gun back and be able to fight out of this mess like we always do. A few seconds pass and we still don't get our strength and continue to walk, or shall I say limp, slowly, never completely gaining balance. So now we move forward in frenzy, looking for something or someone that will trigger the next scripted sequence and carry forward the mission. Suddenly, Jackson's vision goes blurry. Blackness creeps in from the edges of the screen. The player moves even slower for a few moments before falling to the ground altogether. Everything goes white. Another loading screen appears and we are informed that Sergeant Jackson has just been killed in action. Once again, the player has died because he was supposed to, and we are left with lots of unanswered questions like, what just happened? Surely this can't be it. The feeling of disbelief and shock still gets me every time. It's a visually and mentally jarring scene. But it's also very well articulated. If we just look it through the eyes of an artist for a moment, the nuke explosion has been presented in a surreal manner, and since we are playing the game in first-person mode, it really feels like you're watching a movie in which you are the lead character. So when Jackson does regain consciousness, he sees the winds of hell howling with everything around him set on fire. It's a tragic and haunting scene that stays with the player for a long time and shows us the other side of the war. One different from the usual run and gun, kill the baddies and save the good guy stuff that the game usually throws at you. And for some reason, if you want to make it even more horrifying, try to survive long enough to reach this area, where you will hear the haunting sounds of children playing and eventually calling out for help. COD 4 is filled with marvelous set pieces. But for me, these two missions were just too good. They managed to change the perspective of how player death can be utilized to carry forward the narrative. This was something never seen in a video game, and to this day, it stands as a testament to the narrative brilliance of modern warfare. Further, these sequences prove that death can be an important means of eliciting player emotion, rather than acting as a temporary setback. Now in most games, death is handed out to player as a sort of punishment for maybe treading the wrong path or going off game area, or even if the game decides to end player life, it is done so via a cinematic presentation, and it's almost always at the end of the game. But Modern Warfare changed all that. There is never any hint that it is coming. In the first mission, we do get shocked, but since we never get to play as Al-Falani, there is no interpersonal or emotional connection here. But it's an entirely different cup of tea with Sergeant Paul Jackson. We have been completing missions through him and forwarding the story together each step of the way. When the chopper goes down and Jackson regains consciousness all alone, there are no hints given here of the things to come. Why would the game let me play as a dying person? So quite naturally, you expect to regain your health and speed anytime soon. It ought to be coming. You keep hoping for it. And in this hope, we keep moving forward inch by inch. But it never comes. And through this loading screen, we are informed of the horrific news that you just played through someone else's last moments again. This scene is very emotional and brilliant at the same time. The whole scene makes you really, really uncomfortable.
Curve, huh? Man's a ghost.
And this is how the game gets you, because you know from this point forward, all bets are off. There is no guarantee what the game might throw at you next. This feeling of uncertainty stays with you throughout the game, even when you're controlling other characters. In the last mission of the game, when Zakhaev is killing your friends one by one, you are wary that right here this could be the end of the line for you too. If past events are something to go by, then you know nothing can be taken for granted. And all this feeling of uncertainty stems from those two missions, making the game even more intriguing and enjoyable.
Too much radiation. We'll have to go around.
Now, discussion on Modern Warfare is incomplete without this gem of a mission.
Keep low.
Amidst all the chaos of the main narrative, devs managed to come up with one of the best stealth missions of all time.
The word stealth doesn't mean anything to you, does it? Move up.
The mission puts the player into the boots of Captain Price. Yes, remember Captain Price? The guy has not aged at all. Jokes aside, the mission is presented as an assassination attempt on one of the main villains of the game. As a flashback, the mission's events see a young Price and his superior head to the ruins of a Ukrainian city devastated by the Chernobyl disaster.
There's pockets of radiation all over this area. If you absorb too much, you're a dead man.
There they must assassinate,
Imran Zakhaev.
but before they can do that, they must stealthily cross through enemy lines without getting caught. The mission was worlds apart from anything that Call of Duty had ever done before. Initially, the team had doubts whether it would be worthwhile to include the mission like this, but they added it anyways, and when the game finally released, All Gillied Up ended up becoming one of the most fan-loved missions of all times, and one that almost all later COD games tried to imitate in their campaign experience. Now back then, if you owned a console or a PC, you had to get a Modern Warfare. It was the place to be. This was due to the fact that game had one of the best multiplayers of all time. It packed a whole different universe in itself, equivalent to a full-fledged game. The multiplayer introduced new elements like experience points, progression systems, perks, customizable classes and kill streaks that revolutionized Call of Duty and online shooters for years to come. It was equally accentuated by game's engine, featuring true world dynamic lighting, HDR effects, dynamic shadow, depth of field. Also added bullet penetration, which was calculated by engine, taking into account factors such as surface type and entity thickness. Certain objects such as car and some buildings are destructible. Bullet stopping power is decreased after penetrating an object, and the decrease is dependent on the thickness and surface type of the object. All this allowed COD 4 to beat Halo at its own backyard. As already mentioned above, 2007 was a very good year for gaming and some very big titles released that year. Among them was Halo 3. It was a very big deal when it released.
This is the way the world ends.
Game made $170 million in its first day of sales in the US, beating its predecessor Halo 2. This is quite a feat when you consider that Halo 3 was an Xbox exclusive. Naturally, with such jaw-dropping sales numbers, one would assume that during its heyday, Halo 3 was the most popular Xbox Live game. However, Halo 3's reign did not last for long. Just a few months later, COD 4 managed to snatch the crown, earning the top spot in Major Nelson's weekly list of most played Xbox Live games. So what contributed to Infinity Ward's insane success? Retaining the original core team. Yes, low employee turnover was Infinity Ward's secret weapon. This was the secret sauce to Infinity Ward's genre-defining leap into modern setting. The original team that worked on Allied Assault 6 years ago was still intact. By retaining almost all of their old team, Infinity Ward had retained all of the experience, which was crucial as the team was able to work directly on the game content.
Fighting has intensified in the capital city.
Infinity Ward is known to go great lengths to add realism to their games, and COD 4 was no exception. The team went outside the studio and did actual research, even for something as easily overlooked as sound.
Welcome to the new Russia.
In a game where all you hear are announcers and weapons firing, having inaccurate sound effects would break immersion. They studied how different weapons sounded when fired, which also included tanks. In addition, they also had US Marines supervise the development of COD 4 and had veterans help them with motion capture. Game's single-player campaign was a masterclass in storytelling and immersion. Whether you're running out of a sinking ship, experiencing a helicopter crash from the inside, watching a nuclear weapon explode 100 miles away,
Enemy transport sighted entering the target area.
or trying to assassinate one of the main villains of the game,
Target acquired.
Modern Warfare throws gorgeous and immersive visuals at the player throughout every single one of the missions. Call of Duty Modern Warfare was extremely successful, and through that success, Call of Duty managed to rise to the top of the video game industry, growing into an annual multi-billion-dollar franchise. While its two sequels would do even better commercially, the successive titles could not quite live up to the high standards set by the original Modern Warfare game. These games quickly lost critical edge and novelty that made Call of Duty 4 so fascinating and distinct back in 2007, and after the infamous falling out of the original Infinity Ward team, it became even more apparent that Activision would find it difficult to recreate the same magic. Although Activision did get the rights to the COD franchise, but it ended up losing the creative team behind its most radical and beloved game. It was a game ahead of its time, created by a team that loved what they were doing and at a time when creativity trumped money making. That's it for this video guys, thanks for watching.